Good morning. This meeting of the House Education Committee will come to order. Today is Wednesday, March 4th, and the time is 8:03. Members of the House present are Representative Prox, Representative Zolkowski, Representative Grier-Hopkins, and myself, Co-Chair Andy Story. We have and here comes Representative Tuck. Good morning. We have a quorum to conduct business. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones. Today, our recording secretary is Doug Bridges, and Shannon McCain is our LIO moderator, assisting with tech and teleconferencing support. For Gavel to Gavel, we have Jafar Kassel Sadiq. And also online, we have Heidi Teschner with the Department of Education and Early Development for any questions. Thanks to all of you. Today on the agenda, we will continue with public testimony on House Bill 236. As a brief refresher, and good morning, Representative Drummond. Welcome. As a brief refresher, House Bill 236 amends the base student allocation, a key ingredient in determining how much schools receive in state funding. The fiscal year 21 base student allocation amount per pupil increase of $115 incorporates the fiscal year 20 appropriation of $30 million into the formula, while the fiscal year 22 adjustment of $110 reflects inflation at 2.25%, the rate used by the Permanent Fund Corporation in its projections. Overall, the two BSA changes in House Bill 236 reflect flat funding next year and inflation adjusted funding the following year. Without the BSA increase or equivalent funding outside the formula, next year our children and youth will face $30 million reduction to their education. I would like Mary Hockla of my staff to come forward and review the materials distributed to members in their bill packet today. Thank you. Mary, please introduce yourself for the record.
Madam Chair, for the record, I'm Mary Hockla, staff to Representative Andy Story. Just like to note that in the packet of materials, there were two packets distributed to members at the end of the day yesterday. The first packet was composed of three items. One was correcting an error in the sectional analysis. It was just a numeric typographic error. That's corrected now in the ones submitted to the committee. And the second one, in the school funding background document, there was an error in a numeric error at the very bottom. The last number, it had previously read 29 million, it's 28 million. So that's a correction. The third item is a interesting background piece from ICER, Institute of Social and Economic Research, hot topic of funding for public education, and with links to many good resources. So that's what was distributed, along with you each received copies of the written public testimony, emails and letters to date as of Monday received from 75 different individuals. That is included in that quite a thick packet. And as we receive more, we will be distributing to committee members. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Seeing no questions, we will move to public testimony on House Bill 236. I would like to ask those testifying to limit their testimony to 3 minutes. I am going to start with a few people who have been online since 7:50 this morning, and the first one is Dr. Dina Bishop.
Thank you. Dear members of the Alaska State House of Representatives, as well as the House Education Committee, as superintendent of Alaska's largest school district, I write today in support of House Bill 236, as it will provide the first increase to the state's base student allocation since fiscal year 16-17. School district inflationary costs coupled with uncertain or flat funding have challenged Anchorage's school district's ability to maintain class size and initiate those new strategic programs needed to focus on student outcomes. Outside the funding formula, specifically 287, allowed us to soften reductions in the last 2 years. However, the present result is now unknown for funding for F year 21. ASD is required by charter, as you know, to provide a balanced budget to the Anchorage Assembly no later than the first Monday in March. I believe we're the first district out of the gate. This requires the school board to approve our budget in February each year, and with inflationary increases coupled with a growing requirement of support to ASD's growing enrollment of special education students, this has led to multiple staff reductions in general education for next year. We are, as a district, digging deeply into our fund balance, using nearly 27% of available dollars in order to provide classroom support for next year. Nevertheless, the annual focus on doing more with less is in opposition to the local community's expectation that students demonstrate growth in their learning. During the past 8 years, ASD has reduced in every state function except for special education. This continues to grow exponentially over time. The needs are great. Support services and instruction, for instance, which provides critical supports to teachers, was reduced 27%. It's teachers supporting teachers. District administration has been reduced 17%. The easily repeated phrase of the administration is just too big is simply not true here in ASD. Using such phrases to justify insufficient funding levels in the district conflicts with demands and expectations to implement those long-term strategic programs that will increase student outcomes. As I have said before in much of my testimony over many bills, I do welcome the responsibility to improve outcomes for students, for this is precisely why public education exists. I also welcome the accountability measures that couple this responsibility. The rhetoric about administration being too large is simply not a reality here, especially if you take a state comparison of all 53 school districts, in addition to the key performance indicators or KPIs from the other 100 largest school districts in the nation. It's not true. Long-term strategic plans are tough to implement when it is very likely that the resources will not be available to support the work past the current fiscal year. For most of the past decade, the first step in each year's budget process has been to prioritize what's actually going to be cut first, then second, until a balanced budget is made. The reductions that ASD has made over the years are real. Our effort to focus on redesigning programs are, in truth, taking away from our ability to focus on implementing programs that will actually provide our students with their best possible opportunities for successful futures. I strongly urge the legislature to support 236 as well as this committee to move it forward, as our children are and always will be our state's most valuable resource. HB 236 provides enough funding to inflation-proof ASD's budget for the near future, and it's the right opportunity for this legislature to make a substantive effort to support our students, and I appreciate the courage to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Do we have questions for Dr. Bishop? Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop, for calling in this morning. I would like you to go back to your statement about the comparison of the Anchorage School District among the 100 largest school districts in the nation. I think that's an important comparison for Alaska to be aware of, in that ASD ranks up there in the 100th largest. So to look at ASD's numbers in comparison to the rest of the state, it's important to look at how ASD compares to the rest of the nation in size of district and comparable spending.
Thank you. Yes, that in regard to our state, of course, just because of our economy of scale, we are the lowest administration percentage, but even in the 100 largest school districts, we're below the mean in the KPIs, and I could forward those to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bishop, and that's from Great City Schools statistics?
Yes, Representative Drummond. It's from the Council of Great City Schools, which represents, it's an organization that represents and really supports the 100 largest school districts in urban areas across our nation.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a follow-up to that question, Dr. Bishop. Perhaps you could tell us, because we do hear comments that administration costs are high. Can you let us know what you have done to make sure your costs are not high?
Sure. Well, the actual data is that over the 10-year, 17% reduction from over the last 6 years. 17% has been in administration. And in ASD, just so you know, the administration costs are the payroll, the large major functions. But interestingly enough, the 550 in administration really covers how do you administer programs. So when we receive things in our warehouse, someone has to do that work. We have 3,600 teachers. And so when materials come in for teachers, or even to organize lunches and trash, we feed about 25,000 students a day. When you talk about administering those services, you're also talking about administration. I think the thought from folks is that, oh, it just must be someone sitting up in a big fancy, mahogany desk somewhere. I guarantee you there's no mahogany desks around here. And we actually are very slim. Our resources go to schools here. In fact, the reductions, we just took another 2% reduction through this year's budget in administration. The fact is, though, is that outcomes are required. And if, with the reading bill or anything, if we want outcomes, we have to monitor and we have to really invest in those things that we want to ensure happen. And for building leadership, I want to say that leadership matters for parents for safety reasons. I welcome a visit. I'm not sure over the phone how I can describe things other than sharing that the data don't demonstrate what is being said, at least the evidence that I have for Anchorage School District.
Thank you. I have another question. That has to do with health educators. I believe I heard health educator positions will be reduced. How do you plan to address the social and emotional learning positions that you have and deliver health education?
That's a great question, Representative Story. We actually do have a plan for this. We would have never put jeopardy of students' health or mental health up. Our SEL program is actually not simply taught by health. It's infused to every teacher in every conversation, whether our SEL curriculum is infused with bus drivers. Social emotional learning is all around us. It's really what we call those cognitive skills, goal setting, perseverance, grit, as well as we call them the me skills and the we skills. How do I have my self-agency and as well as, cooperation, and how do I work with others? So that's actually infused throughout the system. We increased health educators about 7 years ago in response to an increase in support time for our teachers. And we just designed it this way. It was a great design. We wanted highly trained. However, I have experience, other people in the state have experience of health being taught and infused back in with physical education and classroom teachers. So due to the reductions around the classroom, essentially what this is that just more responsibility is put on the classroom teacher and not so much more time in the day. So we do have a plan. We do not feel as though the health of students is going to be in jeopardy. It's just, again, asking more for the same people to do more with fewer resources in time as well as resources, monetary resources.
Thank you. Any questions, more questions for Dr. Bishop?
Actually, I do.
Okay, and then I saw Representative Prox, so I'll go to him first and I'll come back to you. Representative
No,
Parks.
If you would please, Chairman Drummond first, I'm thinking.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bishop. This is Representative Drummond again. The district's response to the coronavirus outbreak, I'm having a little bit of a hard time finding that information. Could you briefly describe what decisions you've made thus far in order to protect the health of 47,000 students and, what is it, about 6,000 employees?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Representative Drummond, for that question. We had made some critical decisions that weren't very popular, but I wanted to share the one that is most known is really the travel restrictions. We work twice weekly with our local health department in Anchorage, as well as the state health department and the state epidemiologist. So I want to be clear that the decisions have not been made in isolation. Basically, the chances are, and why we've planned for this way, are really threefold. One, of course, staff or students becoming infected, just the danger of just, exposing students. And I know it is the flu. Evidence demonstrates that young people actually fare this flu better than we older people. However, staff and students, knowing their safety is important, we need to prepare for that. Number two, our travel bans have been, in essence, to protect the uncertainty that our young people could be trapped outside if staff get ill, the chaperones for those young people. Schools operate, as you know, in local parentis, so we operate as a caretaker, as in like a parent, if you will, in local parentis. So, and knowing that the responsibility that I have as a superintendent for children, as you said, 47,000 of them, the decisions that I might make for my personal child, my own children, to travel. In fact, I do have had a daughter. She's out of high school, but she did travel to Seattle and to other places over the weekend. I can make that decision as a parent because I can take that risk. The risk of 47,000 students leaving, or 47,000 students here in the district, nearly 1,000 students leaving over the next 2 months, was critical in our decision making because of the uncertainty that we were aware from the federal government. Daily, as you know, the situation changes. And then also the last thing is just as an entity and a responsible entity, a large entity of our city. We make up 1/6 of the city's population coming through our doors every day. The resources that might be necessary to work through a travel or something like that to bring back and think about the larger district at scale is really part of that decision making. To let you know, we are disinfecting buses, doing a major cleaning through all of our charter schools, any kind of schools, neighborhood schools, really teaching kids about hand washing and the length of time that you should hand wash, the importance of it. We do have protocols for our nurses if the disease is discovered, as well as isolation areas. We have also worked out with our city about transportation, that students would not be transported by their families or school district buses. The actual city and the health department provide that transportation to expedite the testing and whatnot and the checking out of the kids. So we have protocols in place. We've been sharing these for about a month, but it is sad, and it was I understand the disappointment of our students, but this isn't about a few students, and it is really about the greater responsibility of a school district to its staff and students and community members.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bishop. I can tell this could be a really extensive conversation, and maybe we'll ask you to call into the Health and Social Services Committee at some point in the very near future. Thank you.
Representative Parks.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I certainly appreciate the school's problem. You're squeezed from so many areas, and everybody expects somebody else to do something, and so I get that. On the other hand, when you when you get to the legislative level, then we're going to have to face the same problem. What do we want to do first, and what things do we have to maybe write off? But do you have some documentation or something that you might be able to send to us, me in particular? I guess I'm ignorant of it. The tasks that you are taking on, those that are mandated by the state, those that are mandated by local, and those that are, I don't know, I guess extras, that are individual decisions that you have control over. I don't know if that makes sense, but what are you doing that you're told to do, and what other stuff, what other priorities that you have? Is there some documentation on that? That isn't even a good enough question, is it?
No, thank you. That Representative, that's a really great conversation. We had this just briefly last night in discussion of our support, just briefly in our school board meeting, support of House Bill 181 for mental health. But if you look in that alone, that bill, it gives you a list of 10 things in the health-wise that schools have to teach. In addition, we can name others, and individually, these are all great programs, great things for kids to know, but the school day hasn't lengthened the amount. So we will get that list. It will be quite extensive, just so that you can see the responsibility of schools now. And that isn't to put judgment that something isn't important. It's just the reality to note that our community relies more and more on schools to educate kids, especially things that used to be learned at home. But we will get that forwarded to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Just the last question I have. I know that you have a very rich, diverse school population there. Can you remind me, when you explain to people the districts and the children, families that you serve, just the demographics that you are encouraging along in their education?
That's a great question, Representative. Yes, I'm not sure very many people know that traditionally, and I don't want this word, I don't know if this is the correct word. I think there might be a new one now, but we are traditionally, what used to be minority is majority now. So the colloquial term for minority, we're a minority majority district with upwards of 60% non-white students. We love our diversity, over 100 languages spoken. We have quite a bit of mobility, about 40% mobility, especially upwards of 75% mobility in some of our Title I schools. So we can see our families move. They're probably renting from place to place. We have I believe, I'd have to get the exact number of ELL students. So we are teaching students really from the get-go English. Many of our ELL kids have come with some education, but the significance of that, when I worked in my former district, we had, a good portion of ELL, but they were Russian, Ukrainian, so you could focus on a language. Here, it's a multitude of languages. So the skills and abilities to bring them up to speed, they're bright kids, bright futures, can add value to Alaska. But we owe it to everyone to teach them the fundamentals and get reading and English down. As far as our poverty, and again, like maybe some other places, some schools are 100% poverty. Others are not. We're about 40% low SES. District-wide, and if you can imagine Anchorage, that almost half of the children, Anchorage citywide, are in need of additional support in, lunch programs and things like that, other programs. So the biggest kicker, though, is that our largest population that's growing is Pacific Islander and Samoan. That's people moving here. Alaska Native is under 10%, but our mixed race is also our largest, growing at 17%. So we are a lovely, awesome city in Alaska, but the challenges are very different. We do have urban challenges that the rest of Alaska really doesn't experience or probably understand occurs in our great state of Alaska.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and I will move on to more public testimony now. And I'm going to go in the room here. Right now, I see that we have Mila Neely, who is here to testify this morning. Please come forward, state your name for the record, and any affiliation that you have.
Sionagata Misladagwadoa. Hello, everyone. My name is Mila Neely, and I represent myself and all of my friends. I am asking you to increase base student allocation because we need more resources for our school. I love my school very much, but some things are starting to get a little tough with all of the cuts. One thing, we now have 32 students in my class. My teacher, Miss Nemi, is a great teacher, but it's hard for her with so many students. It is especially hard with the subs. When we need help, we have to wait for a very long time before the teacher gets to us. There are also some kids in my class who need help with social and emotional learning. They're not bad kids, they just need special kinds of help. Raising base student allocation will help all of us. Another thing is we need more art resources. We hardly ever do art. We are doing art with Miss Shelley right now, which is fun, but we don't really do art in our classroom. I want to be an artist when I grow up, so I think art is important. I am worried that our arts and cultural programs will be cut. Finally, the last time I testified, you said you wanted to see more of me. Well, here I am. Please protect my future by supporting public education.
Thank you, thank you very much. Yes, Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question. Mila, thank you so much for coming in today. How old are you? What grade are you in? And what school is your school that let you out this morning to come and make this important testimony?
I'm 9 years old and I am in 4th grade, and I go to Sayet Gastineau Community Elementary School.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for testifying this morning. I'm going to go back online to Kristen Rutledge from Anchorage. If you could please put your name on the record and any affiliation.
Yes, hi, good morning. My name is Kristen Rutledge, and I'm a lifelong Alaskan and a product of the Anchorage School District. I have 2 children currently enrolled in ASD, a kindergartner and a 2nd grader at Bear Valley Elementary. I watched nearly 5 hours of passionate public testimony 2 weeks ago at the ASD board meeting. It was difficult and frustrating to witness, and only made worse by waking up the next morning to the news that Governor Dunleavy has proposed a $1,300 supplement to the PFD. We can't fund education, but we can afford to give residents checks. The cuts that were passed by ASD last week mean my children have lost an hour of focused health time. This is concerning as our state, country, and the world face a virus that will require the collective public health system to contain and minimize. Health alone to me is a core curriculum, but the loss of this time also means key programs like social studies and science might be moved into library time. How do we expect our children to be ready for the future if we refuse to adequately fund a base core curriculum? The hour less of school a week means my kindergarten will miss nearly 2 months of instruction time by the time he reaches middle school. We continue to cut funding at the college level too. Where are our next doctors, lawyers, teachers, and therapists going to come from? The Talented and Gifted program, Ignite, is also on the list to lose funding in 2022. I have a chemical engineering degree that I had to leave the state to obtain. I felt strongly about coming back to Alaska to raise my children. If we don't fund a robust public education, why would professionals like myself come back to the state or choose to stay? The base student allocation has not increased over the past 10 years to match inflation at a minimum. To me, this is unacceptable. Our state cannot survive on oil revenue alone, and without a meaningful plan to raise revenue, public services are not sustainable. I work in the oil industry, and I'm keenly aware of the instability that comes from a livelihood derived from it. I support an income tax, a PFD cap, a sales tax, I'd rather pay to build a community and a future for my family than watch it dwindle to nothing. Please prioritize education by raising the base student allocation so that our children and our state have a future. Thank you.
Yes, well, I see a question here from Representative Prox.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ma'am, I appreciate what you're saying about the need for education. That certainly is a priority. What have you thought about other things that the state is funding that perhaps should fall off the list or be reduced so that we can fund education?
That's a great question. I guess I am in favor of stop cutting programs and raising revenue. I feel like we don't talk about that enough. We talk about PFD caps that are preserving the PFD. It's hard for me to support continuing giving every residence checks when we can't fund basic services. So I can't really directly answer that question, but to kind of come at it a different way, I'd like to see us start raising revenue, and I'd like to see us pay into the future of the state opposed to try to live within a shrinking means.
Okay, good point. Well, keep in touch.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions, thank you very much for calling in this morning. Next, I would like to go to Kay Andrews from the Southwest Region School Board member, president, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, Chairs Drummond and Story, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kay Andrews. I serve as a board president for the Southwest Region School District. We would like to thank you and your colleagues in the legislature for your continued support for the public educational system and for the opportunity to speak to you today. Our students and all across Alaska, represent the strong future of our state. They are our greatest natural resource, require the support necessary to grow into the leaders and workforce that will keep our great state prosperous for years to come. Our district continues to see substantial cost increase to health insurance, supplies, transportation of goods to our schools, and foresees a renewed upward swing in the cost of fuel oil. As you know, just this year we weren't anticipating the cold weather that we had. And other utilities again this spring. These continuous increases directly impact student district finances and reduce funds available to support instructional programs for our students. Our schools face many issues today, and among them, complex issues related to trauma. There is a great need for training for staff and trauma-informed practices for school counselors, school psychologists, and other related professionals. This need is greater than it has ever been.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrews, for your testimony. Do we have any questions? Yes, I see a question from Representative Prox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Andrews, I didn't catch which school district did you say you were from?
The Southwest Region School District.
Southwest Region, and you are the...
I have to stop myself in my testimony because our children are suffering across the state in trauma-related instances and events that have occurred in our communities and that affect the school districts and staff, and the great need that we have to meet the needs of our students across Alaska. But with the cuts in recent years to other departments at the state level, the state's ability to support our youth in this area has been dramatically reduced. Without stable, predictable funding, our schools' ability to address students' needs is extremely difficult. As was stated earlier, and I'm sure that you've heard many testimony beforehand in the same issues appear across the state. Funds distributed outside the formula are very hard for us as a district to rely on and plan effectively. Funding of one-time nature cannot be used for long-term initiatives, staffing, or other core functions. An example of the need for sustained, predictable funding is our ongoing efforts to increase reading achievement in grades K through 3, which has been a focus for us since 2016. This is not a one-year short-term effect. And with the retention of teachers makes it more difficult because when we train in one area of curriculum, then that has to restart again. So we spend a lot of money in that area when we retaining our teachers, trying to meet their needs. I'm sorry.
No, please take your time. This is important.
To successfully take on an effort of this magnitude, we must be able to predict funding, allowing us to hire quality staff and create sustainable programs. Our teachers do not earn what they deserve. All of us around here in this room, we wouldn't even be here without a teacher. Funding for schools should be distributed through the foundation formula where it can be dependent on and allow districts to make solid long-term plans for instruction. The district strongly supports House Bill 236 and its measures to secure annual predictable funding to allow us to effectively meet student educational needs. I thank you for your support in this matter. Thank you very much for your work. Guyana. I apologize for stumbling.
No apology necessary. Thank you very much for your testimony. I see a question here from Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for calling in, Ms. Andrews. If you could help us understand your school district just a little bit better, what community are you calling in from? How many communities does the Southwest Region School District serve? And how many students are served by this school district?
Okay, I'm from the community. I'm calling from the community of Aleknagik, and we service Togiak, Twin Hills, Manicodic, Kiliginik, Newstuyahawk, Ekwak, Clark's Point, and did I say Manicodic and Aleknagik? We did have to close down Portage Creek, which families have since moved away. They moved to Anchorage, and that community is there. We haven't been able to reopen, or no one has been able to move back to that community. Clark's Point, we did close Clark's Point at one few years ago. Maybe it was longer than that, but they've recently reopened with a lot of help from the community and the CDQ in Bristol Bay that assisted to open back up the school and other resources. So we are putting our other resources to work to help us meet needs that aren't being met currently. You know, you heard the young lady speak. I didn't capture where she was from, the young student in 4th grade, where she said she doesn't have art class. We don't have any of those things. We don't have nurses. You know, I'm currently trying to figure out how we're going to grasp. Well, we have a meeting this afternoon at noon, an emergency meeting in reference to this, this deadly virus that's plaguing our nation right now in the world. So, we're not able to reach out to we don't have health professionals on site at our school sites. We do have the health clinics in most of the communities, but that's just one area of how we have to reach out for resources to meet the needs of the community. And then the transportation, the transporting of goods is a whole nother area. We have to go through this hazmat, you can't transfer this, you can't you have to have certain requirements. And so it kind of has a ripple effect on just this one piece. And then we worry about, concerned about, well, what if we do have a shutdown? And we already know where our students are now. I mean, we wouldn't be able to, we have other states outside of Alaska in the lower 48 where they go to the internet and do work from their laptops. We don't have infrastructure in Alaska. So it seems like we have, a lot of concerns that we're doing our best to meet our students' needs. And we all can be doing better. We all have our strengths in the district, and we all have our weaknesses. I certainly appreciate AASB for helping us to come together and look at those areas where we need work for improvement. I appreciate their guidance, and I certainly appreciate your guidance in your work in understanding our issues across Alaska. I know the travel is expensive, and it's hard to get around the state, but I would really encourage you to come and take a look at some of these schools, and you will notice right away the difficulty it is to teach in a rural setting that has, one teacher that's teaching K through 3, with different levels. So, a high school, we're not able to meet all the high school needs, but we're doing our best to meet those needs in unique ways. And we are doing good things. We do have New Studio Hawk. We have a great school model there. Robin Jones, Principal Robin Jones. We're doing some great things in Southwest. So I don't want to make it sound like we are not doing great things and the students aren't doing great things. They are. And we're doing our best to make sure that they excel. They're ready for the workforce. They're ready for vocational education if they choose, or college. And so we want to make sure that they're on task and ready to meet the world so they could stay in Alaska and help us with the next generation of students. So thank you for your time and consideration today. I really appreciate the work that you do. We really do appreciate the work that you do for Alaska and education.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews, and thank you for your work as a school board member. I'm sure your community is grateful for your efforts. Next, we will go to Robin Jones from New Stoyahuk, Alaska Council of School Administrators. Ms. Jones, are you on the line?
Yes, good morning, Chairs Drummond, Story, and honorable members of the House of Education Committee, and thank you for everything that you do for public education in our state. For the record, I am Robin Jones. I'm the proud principal of Chief Ivan Blanca School, and I'm calling in from New Stuyahock, Alaska, within Southwest Region School District this morning. I was born and raised in Anchorage, and I've served for 11 years in rural Alaska. I am representing the Alaska Council of School Administrators and the Alaska Association of Secondary School Principals. As president of the Alaska Council of School Administrators and the Alaska Association of Secondary School Principals, I am testifying to urge your support of HB 236 to increase base student allocations. As Dr. Parody alluded to in her invited testimony last week, ACSA's purpose is to advocate for quality public education for all Alaskan children. One of our top priorities, as cited in our joint position statements, is priority funding for education, as the state of Alaska must provide timely, reliable, and predictable revenue for schools, funding the actual cost of education in all districts, and providing full funding for all initiatives, law, and mandates that require additional services. Early notification of funding and forward funding are crucial to sound financial management, as well as recruitment and retention of quality educators. A change in the BSA from 5,930 to 6,045 would go far in keeping pace with inflationary costs. Schools just cannot afford to lose any more ground. School districts have faced flat funding for the past several years that does not keep up with the rising costs of operations. Increased fuel prices and health insurance rates and now deferred maintenance must come out of our existing budgets. We struggle to retain the teachers and educators that we currently have. Failing to pass this bill would work against our efforts to prepare, attract, and retain qualified educators. I urge you to support HB 236 and thank you for your efforts to provide adequate funding for public education. I have also submitted my written testimony. Again, thank you so much for your service and for allowing me to testify this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any questions? Yes, Representative Prox.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Jones, I'm guessing your phone or email contact information is with your written testimony? Is that true?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, very good. If I don't call you, please call me.
I will actually be attending the fly-in here next week, so maybe we could set up an appointment.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to move on now to Patrick Mayer, Aleutians East School District. Please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Good morning, everyone. Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Patrick Mayer, and I'm the superintendent of the Aleutians East Borough School District, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 236. Each year, the Alaska Council of School Administrators develops a joint position statement, as you all know, and our number one priority references to assure sound fiscal management for our schools. School boards and administrators need timely, reliable, and predictable funding to recruit and retain quality teachers and principals. Since 2011, the BSA has increased a total of 6%, while the Alaska inflation rate since 2011 in urban areas has been 16.4%. During this time frame, districts have greatly appreciated one-time funding outside the formula from the legislature. Although such funding is difficult to strategically direct to the hiring of new staff or to encourage existing staff to remain in the district. Effective staff recruitment and retention directly benefits students. In the Aleutians East Borough School District, we have 4 separate sites that run with a minimum of staff and basic extracurricular activities. Any increases over the past 9 years, even in that, there's been reductions in certified and classified positions, related to the inflationary erosion to the BSA. We've eliminated counseling positions at PE teacher, a librarian, and restructured our participation in extracurriculars to meet the line where revenues meet expenditures. We'd like to expand our CTE program to fill the needs of today's student and carefully increase our offerings for foreign language and the arts along with trauma-informed practices. Our district's combined positions to the extent that we cannot really add more in the way of administrative responsibilities, as our administrative staff are currently stretched to the limit. After 9 years, it would be timely to adjust the BSA. With the increase to the base student allocation provided in HB 236, school officials and school boards will be in better position to meet the initiatives, laws, and mandates such as the Alaska READS Act that will undoubtedly require additional services. Thank you to the co-chairs of this committee for sponsoring House Bill 236. It was an important first step in narrowing the funding gap created by several years of flat funding. Again, I urge you to support House Bill 236, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify. And just a small editorialization here. We have through ASA, just in listening to Dr. Dr. Bishop's testimony earlier, that we provide a list of unfunded mandates to House and Senate Education, and we can provide you with an updated list for that through ASA, AXA. And I'd like to thank ASA and AXA for keeping these issues in front of educators and in front of the legislature. I appreciate President of AXA, Jones, for her comments this morning, and everyone else who testified. Thank you.
Thank you, and we have a question here from Representative Zolkowski and then Representative Drummond.
Thank you, thank you, Superintendent Mayer, for your testimony this morning. Can you describe a little bit about the demographics of the schools and communities that Aleutians Eastboro School District serves?
So we have 4 schools. Our largest is Sandpoint, 114 students. King Cove, 87. False Pass is at 7, and Accutan is at 23. So False Pass is in 3rd year of Safe Harbor. A number of years ago, we closed Cold Bay School. So I am working with the Cold Bay community to provide services through False Pass in this next year to avoid the ramifications of, the year following the 3rd year of Safe Harbor. So we're being very creative and trying to bring those students that have not had local support from the school district back into the Aleutians Eastboro School District family. Our Alaska Native percentage, that's our major ethnic group, at 87%. Our poverty rate is above 80%, and we still provide a quality education with recognized, need for improvement, like everyone else has articulated this morning. All of these communities are fishing communities. Most of them, well, all of them actually have a fish processing facility, either Trident, Peter Pan, or Silver Bay. The plant in Sandpoint closed for 3 months, actually 4 months during the winter here, which is a surprise to everyone, the first time in history that's ever happened. So that's kind of a shock to us here in Sandpoint, which is the base of operations for the borough and the school district. So in terms of demographics, what else might I be able to provide?
Sure. Follow-up, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. So in your testimony this morning, you'd mentioned the percent of increase for BSA over time and the urban kind of cost of living inflation percent being almost triple that percentage. Have you recognized where inflation, I guess my question is the inflation that you're experiencing in more rural areas at a higher percentage? And then a second part of that question is, we heard this morning how urban school districts are responding to increasing costs. Can you discuss how smaller schools and smaller school districts have been forced to manage these rising costs?
So that's an excellent question. The figures that I quoted are actually ones that are based on urban Alaska. Rural is a little more elusive, and I confess to needing to investigate that a little more thoroughly. But I know that they're higher than when you figure in transportation costs and all of the things that were previously mentioned from folks from Southwest. One of the big things for us is the cost of getting goods out here, and so we've been watching very carefully the discussions about the ferry system, because the original schedule had ferries coming in June and September. Well, how would our teachers get here in August? That's a huge issue for us in terms of getting them out here. So that's kind of the big picture items. In terms of how we deal with shortfalls in the district, well, once you get to a certain point, you have to be able to reduce what it is you're delivering. So we don't have a dedicated PE teacher. We don't have a plethora of electives. We don't have a school nurse. Discussion of the coronavirus in Anchorage. More accessible communities is always a stark contrast to rural Alaska, where, as Southwest mentioned, we use our clinics to kind of fill that gap. But we make do, and so we just have to be very judicious in how we allocate our resources in order to best meet the needs of our students. And our students love it here. When they leave and go to other places, I hear them saying, "When are we going to go home, Mom and Dad?" If they're going to larger communities in different locations. but we do have our challenges, and so this adjustment to the BSA would be very welcome, and I thank you all for entertaining the discussion.
Thank you. Yes, I see. Let's see, Representative Drummond, did you have a question?
Actually, Representative Zulkowski asked just about what I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your testimony.
Representative Hopkins.
Thank you. Yes. We were listening to or talking to one school district, I believe it was last week, and I believe it was Kodiak, that saw a $110,000 increase in their travel costs without the marine highway system being able to run to them and having to use air travel instead. Do you have any figures off the top of your head about what that impact has cost your communities without the ferries?
I do not, Representative Hopkins. I will do my best to obtain that information, collaborating with the borough. And it is a super big deal. And so what we have to do is, we have to go through our freight providers like Coastal and say, gee, what kind of deal can we cut with you? But it will be substantially larger than it would be to get goods out here on the ferry. So I would like to be able to research that and get that information to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I also recommend getting it to the chair of the Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Mayor. I'm now going to go to Jim Anderson, CEO, Anchorage School District.
Good morning. My name is Jim Anderson. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for ASD, and naturally I'm here in support of House Bill 236. Just some quick overview. 87.4% of all of our district revenue is spent on people. So the bulk of our budget reductions also focus on personnel. Since 2013, we've seen a 6.8% decline in student enrollment with a corresponding 9.9% decline in staff. We've closed 2 schools, relocated 2 schools, and we're merging or relocating 2 additional programs next year. We continue to look at every possible change that can reduce expenses. Surprisingly, we have been able to reduce costs in some areas. Examples of some of the reductions from FY13 to 19 include medical. Through numerous actions, to include contracting our own clinic, we've been able to reverse the rising medical costs to where there was actually a 0.6% decrease during that time frame, with additional savings this current year, fiscal 20, and we expect additional savings in fiscal year 21. We've decreased workers' comp claims by over $2 million during that time, or 45%. We've also reduced legal fees by 44%, and we've reduced heat for buildings by just over 10%. But despite our efforts at all of these business side of the house reductions, we haven't been able to stop overall inflationary costs. Some of the things that have continued to exceed what we budgeted: electricity has increased $2.7 million, or 34%. Refuse increased 19.78%. Buildings and ground supplies increased 23.5%. Insurance has increased from 13 to 19, 104%, with an additional 40% estimated increase during years FY20 and 21. Now, the insurance increase for liability is not because Anchorage has done something wrong or anyone in Alaska has done anything wrong. By and large, it's a nationwide trend for liability due to violent incidents in the lower 48 and lawsuits because of sexual assaults. So the sunset of House Bill 287 funds, coupled with inflation, caused us to reduce approximately 50 teachers plus other staff for our FY21 budget. Our biggest challenge really is we have a lot of pressure from the community, from everywhere, to include the students, who should be able to expect and demand the best possible supports. But like every other district, implementing a multi-year strategy for improvement, knowing that you may have to cut it the following year, really forces us into that annual what can we cut first stage. So naturally we support House Bill 236. I do want to point out for the legislators, tough year for you. I do appreciate all that you have to go through to try to figure out statewide all of the challenges and how to resource. But quite honestly, our children are our only future. And so we support House Bill 236. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I would now like to go to Peggy Cowan. Please identify yourself from your record on the record and any affiliation.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I appreciate your service to our students. I am Peggy Cowan, and I am a retired superintendent and currently work part-time with school districts, and I am representing myself. I am calling in support of House Bill 236, and the testimony you were able to hear today and last week has provided some concrete examples and the reality of the uncertain and insufficient budgets in the schools. I just want to mention the unintended consequences beyond the specific and real reductions in programs, cutting of teachers, and reduction in the needed maintenance. The low morale that the cuts cause in schools not only results in the specific reductions that are cut, it also results in anger in the schools about the personal and program losses. And this directly leads to high turnover rate that has been presented to you, and it also impacts our schools and the students. The low morale of the adults affects the school climate, and students and their learning outcomes because of the lower school climate. And I appreciate your leadership and the sponsorship of this bill, and I encourage you to continue to invest your time and your energy and the state's resources in our schools. Our students are truly our future, and this could be a legacy for you, for your future and their future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cowan. Do we have any questions? Yes, Representative Prox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Cowan, you said you are a retired superintendent. Did I hear correctly?
Yes.
Which district?
I was in the North Slope Borough School District and the Juneau School District. And I was the longest sitting superintendent in either of those since organized schools.
Great. And do we have your contact information?
Yes, I emailed last week when I couldn't speak. I emailed the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, and we were sorry that we did not get to all the testifiers last week on the phone. Thank you for your perseverance in calling back again today. We appreciate that. Let's see, we now are to Tom Claymeyer. Could you please introduce yourself? Thank you for waiting.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Tom Claymeyer. I'm a 24-year social studies teacher in the Anchorage School District. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you to Representative Story for bringing this measure forward. I'm the president of the Anchorage Education Association, and speaking on behalf of our 3,200 plus members, most of whom would like to testify, but of course are with their students doing their jobs now. They have untold stories of how much more difficult their jobs have become to educate students, how many fewer resources they have over the last several years, and how many fewer colleagues they have next to them to be able to do the job. The issues of which I won't repeat, they've been much more eloquently stated by so many more people testifying earlier. And while this bill does not represent necessarily the entire solution, it's a great step in the right direction. The community wants investments in education. We hear that all the time. In fact, that's reflected, I think, in some of the other work that the legislature is doing with the Alaska Reads Act in the Senate side and the House bill for increased mental health education. And, you know, it's right for the community and the legislature to want well-performing public schools that are meeting the needs of students. I appreciate the search for efficiencies over the years, but frankly, there are no cuts left that do not harm students and employees, and there's no way to escape the fact that adequate and forward funding must be part of the conversation. So in addition to the good work that the legislature is doing elsewhere, I appreciate that this bill also is part of the conversation because I don't think we can do one without the other. It's a little bit ironic that one of the things in Anchorage that is being cut is the 28 elementary health positions that were dedicated to teach health in the classroom, and yet there's another bill proposing an increase in health education. And so and that was an effort, frankly, to try to maintain some measure of efficiency in class sizes without reducing that. So while we appreciate the efforts to try to maintain class size, like I said, there are no cuts that don't take away student programs. Anyways, I urge the support of this bill. I thank you for your consideration, your service, and all that you do on behalf of Alaska's students. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Claymire? Thank you for calling in, and thank you for your support and dedication to your students. Next, we will go to Penny Vodla from the Peninsula Borough School District, school board member, I believe.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Penny Vodla, and I am the board president of the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District. I'm testifying in support of House Bill 236 to increase to the student base allocation, and I would like to thank Representative Andy Story for sponsoring the bill, and also thank the House of Representatives for their support. I really appreciate that. We must provide adequate, sustainable funding for our schools, for our students, so we are able to continue to provide the quality educational opportunities and services that we are charged to do so under the Alaska State Constitution. By upholding this constitutional obligation, we as a state ensure that we can avoid uncertainties. By upholding this constitutional obligation and by providing a stable, timely funding to the BSA and to school district, we can continue to do things like retain our teachers and not pink slip our teachers. We can recruit and retain new teachers because they need to see us as a stable entity. We need to continue to enhance and support our support programs. We have a strong strategic plan in the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District, and that supports academic growth and student well-being. We put many innovations in place, and we've continued to be collaborative. We're working on personal learning. We're mentoring teachers. We have a nice social-emotional learning in place and moving forward. We have supportive online instruction and counselors. We have interventionists that help students with needs and professional development for our faculty. We've really tried hard to avoid cuts to the classroom, but it's coming to the point where we want to maintain that and we don't want to lose that. We've made incredible efficiencies within our schools and within our district. We've consolidated schools. We've trimmed budgets. We've trimmed $11 million out of our budget in the last few years. We've protected the classroom as much as possible. The last BSA that we received was in 2017, and basically when this BSA is increased and when it is coupled with a predictable and a stable funding, the BSA allows schools and school districts to continue to provide a quality, sustainable educational experience that all children need, so that they have the necessary skills to be successful now and to be successful contributing citizens in the future. Urge you, and I'm sorry that I'm going so fast and I only have 2 minutes, but I urge you to pass House Bill 236 so we can continue as a district and as a state to provide the quality education we are charged to provide. it's a duty. And as a former high school teacher and a college professor and a person who's spent her whole life working with students and working with teachers and celebrating their successes, I personally, and I know all of you do too, so I applaud you, want to continue the success that we've achieved and not go down a path that will not provide our students with a stable, predictable ESA and funding that will support what we are charged to do and what we do best. So I thank you, all of you, and thank you, Representative Story and Drummond, and I could go on and on and on. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any questions for Ms. Waldner? Yes, Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Penny, for calling in this morning. Just as I've asked other school districts, how many students do you serve in the Kenai Borough Peninsula School District, and how many different communities, and what are your transportation issues?
We serve over 8,000 students. We have 42 schools. The schools vary in size from schools across the bay to Old Believer schools to K-12 to a school of 700 to remote schools. So that's the base that we have. We have transportation issues that impact us because we not only have transportation by air, obviously only when students are either attending something, but we have a bus system. Oh, and I don't remember the exact, I should know this, but I don't remember the miles that they travel a day, but we have made efficiencies in our transportation by combining some of the services down in Homer, and we represent really the whole state because we have every type of school, and we have bus service in Seward. We serve buses in Nikiski and the Soldotna area, and we transport students all throughout the Homer area and up to Anchor Point. So it's a pretty extensive bus route. I think we have managed very well to provide a quality transportation for our students, and I think we have varied classroom needs because of the fact that we have schools across the bay that are very difficult to reach. We have quite a few issues with that. I hope I answered that.
Just follow up.
Sure.
When you say schools across the bay, do you mean, which bay are you talking about?
We have school in Tabona. We have schools in Seldovia, Port Graham, in English Bay. We have schools out at the head of the bay, all our Russian Old Believer schools. And that some of those are obviously not impacted by bus transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in this morning. Appreciate your testimony. We'll now go to Dina Mitchell, Anchorage School Board.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dina Mitchell. I'm a member of the Anchorage School Board, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I unfortunately am outside if there's a lot of noise, but I did not get a chance to listen to the testimony this morning, but I did listen. I'm sorry. I did watch last week, and I just want to express my very, very, very strong support for HB 236. It is critical that not only do we maintain our funding going into fiscal year 21 versus what we had in 20, that the $30 million outside the DSA at least is maintained, but we have been cutting since 2011. And I know that many of those in the district, I know Jim Anderson just testified, I didn't hear what he said, but he's put together some information on what we're doing without because of all the cuts we've had to make over the years because of flat funding. And it is our students who are suffering. It is, last week you heard parents and students talking about how upset they are that their younger siblings aren't experiencing the same opportunities that their older siblings had. And I saw that play out with my children. The Anchorage School District, as you know, has made $19.5 million in cuts at our last board meeting. We had to make the assumptions that, we had to make some assumptions. The assumptions we made were that the outside money would not be available to us this year, and that we would have a flat BSA, and we had to get our budget to the municipality by March 2nd. A few things that I just want to talk about that you've heard over and over again. One of the things we cut that really breaks my heart, because we know that we have so many needs in terms of mental health support in our state. We made the decision to eliminate our dedicated health instruction and absorb that back into our physical education and classroom instruction, which means that our kindergarten through sixth graders will not receive the in-depth, valuable curriculum that has made an impact on student safety in so many ways. When we know that suicide is the leading cause of death for people 10 through 64 in the state of Alaska, we know that that information is so important to our students. It also means that we are putting back onto our elementary classroom teachers who have more to do than they can handle already this health and social emotional content. We have, as you know, we spend many, many resources and much time building budgets based on assumptions and contingency planning every year. If we had predictable funding from year to year, we could utilize our human resources much, much more effectively and provide more stability for our teachers. Also, related to that, the constant shuffling of resources due to that flat funding, the associated cuts we have to make because of inflationary pressures, creates a lot of stress for our teachers and our other staff. That leads to higher teacher turnover. And as you know, ICER estimated a few years ago that it costs about $20,000 to hire and train a new teacher. And I imagine that cost will go up as we face a national teacher shortage and the issues we have with UAA. So that puts a further strain on our finances. We have cut many programs over the past few years, and once a program is dismantled, it's very costly to rebuild that. The training and the knowledge and the experience that went with that is gone. Usually those programs are gone for good. And each of those programs was developed to serve students in meaningful ways, and it required resources to build and develop those. Class sizes in the larger districts for sure have increased to the point that teachers can't have meaningful interactions with their students many times. And as you know, more and more of our students do require behavioral supports, and we're cutting the number of aides we have in our classrooms, and we need more behavioral management, professional development for our teachers, and for all of these reasons, it's really tragic that we have been losing resources year over year. So I think I will just close with highlighting some of our legislative priorities that hopefully you're all familiar with. We do want the BSA inflation-proofed. We need to increase the number of safety officers we have, mental health professionals, counselors who directly connect with students and keep them safe. We need to keep our class sizes from creeping up. In our budget for this coming year, our secondary 7th through 10th grade, 12th grade classes are going to go up slightly. We need to improve the physical safety of our buildings through buzzer systems, security cameras, strategically placed front offices, et cetera. We need more aides and specialists to work with our students. And as you may or may not be aware, our board voted to include a line item for $68 million, which is the additional revenue we believe that the Anchorage School District would need based on the Picus-Oden study commissioned by the school board a few years ago, if we truly wanted to provide adequate resources to give our kids a good education. So I really, really appreciate this bill. I also want to express my appreciation to the entire legislature for focusing on pre-K this year, because if we can get support for our moms during the prenatal period and through the preschool years so that our kids arrive to our district truly ready for kindergarten and without the adverse childhood experiences and trauma that we see them with, we can truly amaze you with the outcomes that we can nurture in our district. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I fear that I went over my 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Any questions for Ms. Mitchell? Yeah, Representative Prox.
Manager, how are we doing for time?
That's a good point. We have one person in the room who wants to testify, and we have 3 more online, and we have a half an hour to go. So if you want to ask a question, that's fine.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if you were with the school board, if you have a breakdown of cost per service offered or program offered or something like that. Do you break it down that you can identify that discreetly?
I am sure that that is available to a certain extent. I don't know how granular it gets, but I can certainly ask Mr. Anderson about that.
I would appreciate that if you could send it to us, please.
And are you thinking of services for our special needs students or just in general?
Just kind of in general, I would think there would be kind of a long list of services, and
Yeah, we can.
it's hard to say which cost what.
Give you a sense of what all the district provides.
Okay,
Yeah, no problem.
thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your dedication to the students and families that you serve in your community.
Well, and I so appreciate this committee, so thanks again. Thank you for your service.
Yes, and now I'd like to go to Beth Short Rhodes, who's been online from Sitka. If you could please introduce yourself and if you represent anyone.
Yes, good morning. My name is Beth Short Rhodes. I live in Sitka, and I'm representing myself. Co-chairs Drummond and Story and members of the committee, thank you so much for hearing testimony on House Bill 236. I urge you to support this bill. There's been a lot of great testimony today from professionals who can tell you all the reasons why our schools need this bill, but I just wanted to speak as a parent. I'm the mother of a middle school child, and a year and a half ago we lost to the librarian at that middle school. So there's no longer a library for children to access. We currently have no school counselor at our middle school, and we live in a district where we desperately need school counselors. There's a lot of, a lot going on in our community that makes it difficult for children to have stable home lives, and when they come to school, they really, really need a counselor to help them work through what's going on at home so that they can do well in school. We have one school nurse for our entire district of 1,200 students. And in the time, of coronavirus that's happening right now, that's really, really frightening to me to think that there is one trained professional to be on hand if our little town is hit with the virus. So I know that school staff are working heroically to make do with what we have. I see that every day. But if we can't keep up with inflation, we're going to continue to lose important resources. And I don't know what we can lose next if we already have lost a library, a counselor, and have just one nurse. So the bottom line is that our students are going to suffer here in Alaska, and in turn, the social and economic well-being of our state is going to suffer in the future as students are graduating from our schools or perhaps not graduating and find themselves ill-equipped to hold down jobs, raise families, and contribute to Alaskan society. So thank you very much for putting this bill forth. I urge everyone on the committee to vote for it, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. Now we will go to Andy Holman online.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Andy Holloman. I'm a retired educator out of the Anchorage School District after 20 years. I'm currently serving on the Anchorage School Board, but I am calling representing myself. As a lot of you know, we have held the BSA flat for a long time, and there's been supplemental funding of a one-time nature. And I think school boards across the state understood that they weren't supposed to bring on programs or staff that they expected to keep for long periods of time. Otherwise, because the one-time funding was always one-time funding, it was there for a year. Unfortunately, inflation is cumulative. It's always cumulative, and it's been building, but we've been trying to hold our core services inside of the BSA, and we've done that by letting class size get way too large. We have a lot of elementary classes in the upper 20s and low 30s, which is just beyond where anybody thinks they should be. And we've been trimming services. We thought we could save a couple of million by eliminating the Ignite program or restructuring it, basically, to use less staff. We got told by the community that was not an acceptable solution to our issues. We are doing things that hurt our basic core services in an effort to stay inside of this BSA cap with our long-term commitments. If we have to cut education, I think we need to have that discussion broadly, but it's time to inflation adjust the BSA on a regular basis or have that discussion openly so that people really do understand what's happening. So I hope you'll support this. I hope you'll give us something to work with to keep delivering critical things to our students, as well as not letting class size get to ridiculous levels. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Holloman? I don't see any here. I just wanted to thank you too for your time that you give to your community and on your serving on your school board.
Thank you very much.
We'll go to Margot Bellamy and then we'll come back to the room.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to just share a few thoughts with you this morning. My name is Margot Bellamy, and you've already heard from two of our school board members here in Anchorage. And so I'd like to also call in support of HB 236. You know, sometimes there are just things that are the right things to do, and this is one of them, because it is the right thing to do for all of our kids. Now, I'm located in Anchorage. I serve the Anchorage community, but I really serve all the kids in our state. And this would help not just Anchorage, but all school districts to maintain quality services and opportunities for all of our kids. And you've heard a lot of the impact from members Mitchell and Holloman. And so I'm not going to repeat all of those. But it was, as a new person on the school, the newest person on the school board, having to submit a budget that reflected $19.5 million deficit. It required cutting of programs, redesigned to critical programs such as health and PE, our library service, our assistant principals, that administrative support, and possibly even a delayed start, early release options. And the future does not look very bright without the courage to do the right thing. So, you know, it is not going to be the end of our battle, and this won't be the decision that the hardest decision that you'll have to make. I don't think it should be, but it will provide some immediate and necessary help to districts who are struggling to meet the needs of students. So I thank you for your service. I thank you for your advocacy for education. And I urge everyone to please dig deep, think hard, and do the right thing for our kids in the state of Alaska. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your testimony. We have a question here from Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bellamy, for calling in. Remind us, not everybody at this table knows who you are. You are also a retired educator, as well as an ASD board member now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm a retired educator, administrator, and central office administrator. 43 years of advocacy for education and working with youth and families.
Wow. Thank you for your service and continuing your service as a school board member. You mentioned a possible delayed start, early release. Is that actually part of the budget that you completed last week?
The week before. That is part of how we are going to redesign how we are delivering some of our services. So the delayed start would be up to each school. I mean, whether they do a early release or a delayed start, the schools would decide how they're going to do that, and then the content of that time. So professional development and or the kinds of things that you just can't. We're just not going to be able to do otherwise.
Follow up?
Yes, follow up.
And do you, if there is a delayed start or early release, do you still meet the state requirement for, I forget what it is, 180 days of instruction a year?
Yes, absolutely. We are not going to. I mean, we've got to. That part. Yes, we have to meet the law. We're not going to break the law. So we'll have to structure the day. So and to tell you the truth, a lot of that is still under the administration is still working that out so that we are compliant and that we are able to fit in the day, in the week, all the things that we need to be able to do for kids.
Okay. Thank you.
But I can get the committee more information on that. So it's just tough from this end. From the other end, from my other lens of being a principal, having to make adjustments at the site, to being at the central office, trying to make make adjustments for the whole district, and now trying to make adjustments to fit the whole community. It is quite an enlightening view, and it's a view I wish everybody could have because it shows the challenge in a way that that you just don't think. I thought different as a parent when my kids were in school. I thought different as a principal. I thought different as a central administrator. As a school board member responsible for delivering education to this entire community, which is a wonderful community, much like all the other communities, it gives you a whole different, not just knowledge, but level of appreciation for the work that you guys have to do and the trust that people put in us as board members to have to do.
Thank you, Margot. I'm glad you are where you are, and I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Yes, the Representative Prox had a question, and then Representative Tuck.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Bellamy, did I get that right? Thank you for testifying. I'm getting a much better handle on the issues in front of you. I asked somebody else from the Anchorage School District, I forget the position, but if we could get some idea of the core services that you spoke about, which are mandated services, and some sort of a cost breakdown per services, well, I guess, and the value is what we need to know. That would be helpful for me at any rate.
And absolutely. And if I were home, I would have it right in front of me. I'm not at home, but I will make sure I will make sure that the committee gets a copy of that. Because we've already given that thought. We have that information. When we set out when we gave the superintendent direction and the staff direction on how to build a budget, we considered everything. And so we have that information, and we'll be happy to get it to you.
Thank you. Representative Tuck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Bellamy. I just want to comment on the comment you made that in the different roles that we have, we think differently.
Yep.
And we come at it from a different angle. We come at it from a new perspective at times. And, serving on the school board, I had the opportunity to micromanage departments. When we get up to the level of the state level that we're at right now, we're going to have to trust those who are testifying and know that they're doing everything they can to make their school districts function and to make their school systems successful.
Mm-hmm.
And what the comments I'm hearing now is that, hey, we have got the vice on tight on these districts. And to ignore the needs and to really just put a blind eye to the importance that Alaska right now, we need new revenues.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to thank you for your testimony. Thank you for sharing all the work that you're doing and all the other testifiers that we had today, because it's high impact. It's just showing that if you want to kill opportunities, if you want to kill hope for Alaska, stop funding for your schools. And what I
Absolutely.
don't want to see happen is I don't want to see where we lose hope, we lose those opportunities. We put the squeeze in our school district so much that all of a sudden the big fix is a voucher system or some sort of system that actually only provides for the privileged. And I'm just really concerned about the decisions that we're making here today. You know, we passed the budget yesterday. We did not see, we actually saw a reduction in school spending, if anything. And I mean, I want to thank the sponsors of this bill. And I probably should save this for closing comments on this bill. But I just hearing the testimony today is showing the importance that this committee, we need to do something. We really do. We need to do something for this House, we need to do something for this legislature, and we need to do something for this state of Alaska, and it starts right here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Tuck. We have 3 people left to testify. I'm going to go to Sean Cohn, who is in the room here. Please come forward, introduce yourself, put your name on the record, and any affiliation. To the left, there's perfect. Or, yeah, you're right where you're going. Sorry.
Yes, hello. I appreciate the opportunity to comment today. My name is Sean Cohn. I am a resident here in Juneau, former elected school board member in Haines, Alaska, a current member of the site council for Juneau Douglas High School here, and also coming here as a parent with a child, a junior. Actually dropped him off to take the SAT test about 30 minutes ago. And I appreciate the work that the committee is doing here, and I think it's bringing to the attention of the legislature and the public an extremely important issue, and that the base student allocation needs to increase. Continually putting Band-Aids on top of a slow bleed, which has been the budget over the last almost decade now, is an unsustainable program. You need to increase the base student allocation so that it is a reliable funding source for all of the school districts. Continually doing a one-time appropriation, while greatly appreciated, is not the long-term solution. The Alaska State Constitution requires that we fund the education of our children. It is not an optional spending program. It is a basic core responsibility of the legislature to provide this money. Now, for certain members of the legislature to point at the budget that is $30 million less than it was last year and call it fully funded is not being intellectually honest. This is being intentionally deceptive and misleading, and it needs to stop. If they're going to cut $30 million out of the budget, they need to call it a cut, because that's what it is. I would also like to point out that reduction in expenditures, reduction in the budget for the schools is something that happens through attrition, as everybody in this committee knows. And it doesn't matter if you say, hey, I kept the shark from biting a big chunk out of you, when you're being nibbled to death by piranhas. Inflation and the rising costs of services and goods takes a nibble out of it every year, and it will continue to do so. I strongly support House Bill 236. I think the base student allocation has been something that's needed to be addressed every year. It's something that they've kicked this can down the road, and they need to stop. The legislature as a whole needs to address this honestly. I would also like to point out that it has economic impacts for the community. It has economic impacts for the state that go past just the obligation to educate children, because, as many people know, what they used to call VOTEC, now they call Career Technical Education Programs, typically are the programs that have some of the lowest number of students. You can't put 35 kids in wood shop class or an auto shop class and be safe. You're working around the equipment, you're working around the machinery. Those are some of the programs that are going to be disproportionately impacted the first, because they have the lowest pupil to teacher ratio. We are already looking at Juneau Douglas High School at some of the core classes that start with almost 40 kids in them. So when they look at that, and then they look at the auto shop or the wood shop class with a couple dozen maybe, guess what gets cut first? And those kids are going to go on to form the basis of our industrial might in Alaska. We need the VOTEC classes, and it makes them an easy target when you're looking at these huge increases in the pupil-to-teacher ratio over the last 10 years. So again, I would just like to close with saying that I strongly support House Bill 236. I appreciate the work that the committee is doing here, and I strongly encourage the legislature to be honest about this. As the representative from Anchorage had pointed out, if you're going to make a cut, call it a cut. Don't take $30 million away from last year and call it fully funded. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Mr. Cohn? Seeing none, thank you for coming in, and thank you for serving on your school site council. We have two more people to testify, both online. I want to close our meeting on time, so please stay to the 3-minute limit. And I'm going to Chris Eckenlob in Eagle River. Please introduce yourself and any affiliation.
Hi, this is Chris Eckenlob. I represent myself. I'm going to be one of the few callers that actually call this a taxpayer that has, that's not going to be one of the takers of the program. Anyway, I oppose this House bill for several reasons. The first reason, and the most important one, is that we are not managing our resources properly. Much like Representative Tuck said, you know, people want to see results, you know, and you can't micromanage the school districts when you're giving them this money. So all you can do is look at how they're spending the money and where they're spending the money as a general group, okay? And, you know, I live in Eagle River, so I'm going to tell you the Anchorage School District that need, you know, and another thing, just like the last person said about, you know, using proper terminology. You know, whenever I hear flat funded, I think lie, and I don't want to hear anything else the person has to say, because, you know, we lost maybe 10% of our students, and we're gaining money. How can that be a flat funding? I mean, they're actually gaining funds per child. We pay almost twice as much as anybody else in the nation. We pay almost, we are second to the highest in the nation for paying our teachers. So they're all being properly paid and taken care of that way, but it's how we're spending our resources and where the money's going. You know, we have some work to do on that before we increase funding, because when we're getting bonds like every other election, and we're approving them, and these bonds are almost equivalent to 10% increase in their budget. And now they're asking for more when we're at a time in this state when we're at a crunch. We got to figure out who you're going to take that money from to give it to them, to increase it. So I'm kind of frustrated with that, you know, and when I hear that flat funding, you know, that's a bunch of garbage. Every time I hear that, it just pisses me off. So you guys have any questions for me?
Any questions? Representative Tuck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment that when we lose students in our school systems, we're actually losing funds, because the base student allocation is based on how many students are going to a particular district or a particular school. And then also you lose the economy of scale. So it increases the cost for each one of those students that remain in the school system. So I'm not quite following that logic. Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Well, you know, when their total budget, I know your base allocation is different, but when their total budget keeps increasing and you lose children, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. If you have 55,000 students and you lose 5,000, you don't hire more teachers. I mean, that's just stupid. So when we're doing that, and then, you know, that's what I'm talking about, not mismanaging our resources. If we're not mismanaging the resources they have, and we, you know, they're getting other money besides what you guys are giving them for this base allocation. So, you know, their budgets are going up, and it doesn't matter how much that you guys increase this base student allocation, their budgets will continue to rise, even though we're losing students. I mean, it doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, thank you. You know, I can say this, that our class sizes are going up, so it's not like we're hiring more teachers. That's for sure. And we also do not have flat expenses. Expenses are going up. Transportation costs are going up. Our energy costs are going up. And I think that's what the purpose of this bill is to overcompensate that so we can get our teacher to student ratio back to where it's controllable and manageable.
Well, I got a challenge for you. Go unannounced to any of the elementary schools in your area and pop your head in the door. I guarantee you will not find a class size over 30. I mean, I have grandchildren that go to these schools, and I go in there, and very rarely do you see them over 20, 25. So when I hear that, that's an anomaly. That's not the average.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We have 2 more people online, and I really want to get to them, and we're almost ready to close. So thank you for phoning in and for sharing your comments. And I'm going to go to Mr. Morgan from ENIAC, and please limit your testimony to 3 minutes so we can get through our last testifier. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair, co-chairs, and members of the committee. This is Herman Morton. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with the last caller. I don't agree with throwing more money at it. It's going to make it better because it's not right to have the lowest test scores in the nation and our kids are not getting a quality education. And when they get out of school, like they have to take remedial college courses and it's more expensive. And until they start showing results, I think it's too top-heavy. It's too top-heavy. And you're taking away a permanent fund that a lot of them put away for college and trade school. You're taking away even that opportunity, even though the money's in the permanent fund there. You're spending too much money, and throwing more money at it isn't going to help any, especially UAA. You know, we're a shortage of teachers, and here UAA we're not even turning out accredited teachers. And the teachers are they're teaching right now. We see it. And we wonder why our test scores are so low. And you can ask them, gee, why should we give you guys more money when you guys are the root of the problem and you're not turning out teachers? Maybe you guys got to admonish the Board of Regents or somebody. It's not right to throw all this money and take away their permanent fund and say it's for quality education, and when they're not getting a quality education. Another thing about universities, you people sitting there, Mark Newman, Representative Newman, he say, you guys should listen to the people. And when they get up to speak, we watch you guys. You guys not even paying attention. A lot of the universities, they find that they're funded by foreign entities. They even find out that some of them, they're soldiers, a colonel in their army going there, and then that foreign country donate a lot of money to the university, investigate the university to find out why they're only raising tuition on Alaska students.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your testimony and for calling in today. Now I'm going to go to Ralph Watkins, and I just got notice there's one more person in the room, so please indulge for 2 more. Please keep your testimony to 3 minutes. Welcome, Mr. Watkins.
Good morning. My name is Ralph Watkins. I'm the superintendent of Hoonah City Schools, and I'm representing myself and my district. I had sat down and wrote a prepared piece of testimony to share with the committee, but after listening to the last 2 callers, I was shocked to hear the rationale and the reasoning behind not wanting to support an increase in the student-based allocation. The comment and the belief that our Alaska students get a subpar education, to me, is offensive. As an educator in the state of Alaska for the last 6 years, I would put our education up against any other education system in the world. In the world. Our teachers are dedicated. They're professional. They work hard to instruct our students. Educating a student is more than just sitting a student in a classroom with a book or a computer or even an amazing teacher. It takes a whole system to provide a quality education. And that system, unfortunately, is run and needs funds to do it. I'm sitting in a district with a $3 million budget, and we're looking at going into next year with almost a $400,000 budget deficit, not solely because of flat funding, but because we need to pay our teachers. We need to provide insurance, curriculum, supplies, and to hold our funding hostage in the legislature or in the minds of people who just are looking at their own pockets. George Benson said it best. He says, I believe the children are our future. And if we're going to invest in our future, that means we're going to invest our dollars and our time. And so I support this bill wholeheartly. Even if I wasn't an educator, I would support this bill wholeheartedly. I have 6 children, 3 of whom have gone through school here in Alaska, and they are doing amazing. I have a staff of teachers who are working diligently and hard, sometimes for free, for nothing. And so if we're gonna make the investment necessary to provide a quality education that meets the standards of our community expectations, then let's support it. Let's not bicker about it in the legislature or on phone calls where we speak in uninformed terms based on how this impacts your pocketbook. Think about our children, think about our teachers. And to say that our districts are top heavy, I am the superintendent, principal, sometimes middle school teacher, and custodian to my district. I have a business office of 2, and we are providing a quality education. For the last 3 years, we've graduated 100% of our seniors. More than 70% of those have gone on to post-secondary, either in the UA system or outside the UA system or in vocational. So stop with the falsehoods. We have a quality education system here in Alaska. We should support it. And that is all that I have to say. Thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate you guys in the legislature taking this conversation up. It's not popular, as you can tell by the phone calls, but it's a necessary conversation, but it needs to move beyond conversation to action. Let's take some action. Let's increase the student-based allocation to support our teachers, our students, and our education system here in Alaska. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins, and thank you for your work. And then I just wanted to say, I hope your son is improving, and many people have been keeping them in their thoughts.
Thank you so much. My son is doing improving. He was just released from rehab, and now he's in outpatient rehab in Las Vegas. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Sure. Representative Drummond, if you could have a quick question, that'd be great, because I do want to
Question.
finish
Thank
this
you.
up.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Watkins, for calling in. If you could please email us your prepared testimony. I know you were winging it due to the previous couple of calls, and I really appreciate the message you gave us today. Thank you.
Shauna O'Sullivan, if you are, oh, there you are, Shauna, please come forward and put your name on the record and any affiliation.
Hi, Madam Chair and members. My name is Shauna O'Sullivan. I'm here representing myself as a parent from Juneau, Alaska. I worked actually in the school district for about 5 years before I had children as a substitute teacher and paraeducator in every school in Juneau and a couple in Ketchikan. And then as a parent, I was a volunteer heavily when my daughters were young, and I worked in the classroom and after school in different activities, and also on site council. And one thing that I just wanted to address is the fact that the schools, I would repeat everything, confirm all the comments about reductions in resources. I've seen that over the last 20 years. My oldest is now at the university. And I lived through watching the elimination of nurses. I was a substitute nurse at one point, and I don't have a medical background, so that was pretty terrifying to be given the responsibility of administering medications to children that needed it. I was shocked that I was doing such a thing. And then as a parent, I spent enough time in the school district to watch the reductions in the librarians. And one thing I want to note is, as site council, that that's a volunteer group that raises funds to help support extracurricular activities, but increasingly they are supporting some of the basic needs inside the classroom. So teachers submit requests to site council, and we would see increasing numbers of requests for things that were previously in the budget. And we had to eliminate things like Discovery Southeast for kids that were just too expensive for us, because the other piece of that is that volunteer numbers are decreasing. I was fortunate to be a parent who had the time to volunteer, and then at one point I lost my husband 5 years ago, and I could no longer do that. I had to work full time. And then I became the parent whose children, now the youngest, are in Raleigh full time. So the point that I want to make is that schools are stretched thin because families are stretched thin. We know recent reports say many families with children cannot operate on one income. And we know that schools are raising our kids. We have talk about reductions or teachers' preferences in class sizes. And I think class sizes are very different now than they were when I was in school. We have diverse makeup in the classroom, and I think that's benefited our kids. Our kids are really inclusive, global members of society. I think that's important. And I see very sophisticated children who are very inclusive. I think we should celebrate that. But I know I don't have much time, so the other piece I want to mention is that we need to be realistic and take a really good look at the society that we're serving, because I think what we aren't recognizing is that our families are really expecting schools to raise our children. Our schools are being open longer. The facilities are being used full time. We have kids who are in school until 5, 6 p.m. So flat funding is reduction. I've seen reductions in the last 20 years. And I think I appreciate you opening up this conversation so that we can be realistic about what we are expecting from our schools, our public school system. And I hope we fund it accordingly. I support this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Drummond.
Thank you, Shauna, for coming to testify. You said something that your children are in Raleigh full-time?
Part-time.
I don't understand what that is.
Family. So after school care that's provided in the schools is Raleigh.
Okay.
And we have 2 that are part-time Raleigh. So they go there until parents are are off work. Right. They also offer Raleigh on holidays when school and teacher conference.
Thank you. I hadn't heard that term before, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you. That program's unique to Juneau, that they offer that, and it is paid for separately with some funds by community schools.
Okay. But increasingly students are in the schools longer than when I was there.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your testimony. One person did call online. Can I have the committee's indulgence to take this last person? Thank you for coming in today and for your support of our community schools. So Bill Bjork is online, and this will be the last testimony today. Thank you for calling in and for waiting.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My name is Bill Bjork. I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska. I've been listening to the teleconference, and I was motivated to call in to give ever so brief testimony by some comments of an earlier speaker. First and foremost, thank you to the sponsors of House Bill 36. I absolutely support the notion of the bill. We need to improve the base student allocation, or if the best you can do is to hold it harmless, don't cut the money that was put there last year, please. So thank you very much to the sponsors, and thank you to the committee for their work. An earlier speaker suggested that Alaska teachers were the best compensated teachers in the country, and I call in to say, with all due respect, that is simply not true. I will pledge to work with my professional organization to provide you the relevant data, and there's several sources for the data. But I'm a retired teacher. I've taught for 36 years. Most of my career in Fairbanks, Arctic Village for 6 years before that. I'm well versed and have stayed in touch with the school system and working through the school system here in Fairbanks. Folks, we are at a juncture in funding for Alaska schools. We need to improve the base student allocation. But thank you so much for your consideration today.
Thank you very much for calling in and for your words. I'm going to now close public testimony. I did want to say that last week, people who did not call back, we lost 14 who were unable to testify, and I hope that they will submit written testimony if they haven't. And then unfortunately, one person I did not get on. They had to drop off before I could call on them. So I hope they too submit written testimony to the committee. I just appreciate everybody being here and phoning in and sharing their perspectives. Does any member have any comment they want to make on the testimony today? Seeing none, and it is late, I just want to remind everyone there's a deadline of tomorrow, Thursday, March 5th at 2 p.m. for amendments to this bill, House Bill 236. If you have any questions, please be in touch with Mary Hockala on my staff. Our next meeting is Friday, March 6th already. I can't believe that, 8 a.m. At that meeting, we will hear any amendments received for House Bill 236 under bills previously heard, and will consider moving House Bill 236 out of committee. We will also hear House Bill 180, Board of Regents at the University of Alaska. With that, at 10:03, we are